Welcome back, movie lovers. May turned out to be one of those months where I spent a lot of time living in the 3-star zone. And for me, that's not a bad thing. 3 stars is a solid theater watch in my review book. Good popcorn, good air conditioning, a couple interesting ideas, maybe a cool performance or two. And if you missed any of these in theaters, keep an eye out for an upcoming streaming release. This month I revisited a couple all-time masterpieces, discovered a few pleasant surprises, watched some genuinely twisted and weird horror movies from YouTubers making it into the big leagues, and watched one film that was so bad it felt like it was actively trying to lose points while I was watching it. Looking at you, Pitfall. So let's crack open the movie diary and get started. First up is the long-awaited return to the fashion world with The Devil Wears Prada 2. And while this sequel doesn't quite strut down the runway with the confidence of the original, I still found it pretty enjoyable. What surprised me most is how much the movie leans into aging, relevance, and the changing landscape of media and fashion. The original film was really about ambition and career obsession. This one feels more interested in asking what happens when the industry starts moving faster than you. And of course, Meryl Streep still walks into scenes like she's Darth Vader entering a rebel blockade. The woman barely raises her voice and everybody immediately starts sweating. Not a great sequel. Not a terrible sequel. Just a pleasant reunion with characters I enjoyed spending time with. I'm landing at 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. From the runways of New York to a galaxy far, far away, for the May the 4th celebration, I revisited one of the movies that completely changed my life, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. What can I even say? This movie changed my life. Every time I revisit A New Hope, I'm reminded that George Lucas somehow took Flash Gordon serials, westerns, samurai movies, mythology, hot rods, World War II dogfights, and mashed them together into something completely new. The result was movie magic. And even after all these years, the imagination still overwhelms me. Darth Vader, Tatooine, the Death Star, the Millennium Falcon, the Rebel base on Yavin 4. Every frame feels like it contains another idea. As a kid growing up flipping through Starlog magazine and sketchbooks, this was gasoline on the creative fire. And that final trench run? Still one of the greatest finales ever filmed. 5 stars out of 5. The movie that changed everything. Next came a political drama that sounded right up my alley on paper. The Wizard of the Kremlin. This one hurts because I wanted to like it. The premise sounds fascinating. Political intrigue, power struggles, Russian influence, historical drama. All ingredients I normally enjoy. Unfortunately, the movie felt like eating plain oatmeal while somebody reads a Wikipedia article to you. There are conversations, then more conversations. Then people enter rooms to have slightly different conversations. And while I appreciated the performances, the movie never really came alive for me. I kept waiting for the spark, the urgency, the danger, something, anything. Instead, I mostly admired it from a distance. 2 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. Then came one of my bigger disappointments of the month with Mortal Kombat 2. This one was particularly disappointing because I was genuinely hyped. Carl Urban as Johnny Cage? Sign me up. The problem is the movie takes itself way too seriously. Had they embraced the goofy energy of Big Trouble in Little China, this could have been a blast. Instead, everybody spends most of the movie acting like they're performing Shakespeare while dressed for a fantasy convention. Carl Urban is easily the best thing here. Every time he showed up, the movie got more fun. Every time he left, the energy left with him. There are a couple decent fatalities, a few fun moments, but overall, this one needed a cheat code. 2.5 stars out of 5. Thankfully, my next rewatch was a whole lot better. Revisiting The Cabin in the Woods on the big screen was an absolute blast. And what struck me this time is how well the movie still works, even when you know all the surprises. Drew Goddard's direction and script are just so damn clever. It starts as a familiar horror movie. College kids, remote cabin, bad decisions. You know the drill. Then it slowly pulls the rug out from underneath everything. And suddenly, you're watching a movie that's making fun of horror tropes while also celebrating them. The giant monster payoff still rules. The humor still lands, and the movie somehow manages to please both horror nerds and casual audiences at the same time. It might be one of the smartest horror movies of the last 20 years, disguised as a wild, blood-soaked midnight movie. 4 stars out of 5, one of the best horror rewatches I've had in years. And speaking of surprises, one of the nicest surprises of the month arrived in the form of Tuner. I went in knowing very little and ended up having a genuinely good time. Leo Woodall plays a struggling piano tuner trying to make ends meet, and there's something immediately likable about him. He reminded me of a young Stallone, those sad eyes, that underdog energy. You just want things to work out for him. And Dustin Hoffman looks like he's having an absolute blast playing his tuning partner. What really worked for me, though, was the character chemistry. The movie reminded me of those smaller human dramas from the late 70s and early 80s, like Breaking Away and My Bodyguard. Movies where you simply root for people. Not superheroes, not chosen ones, just regular folks trying to get through life. And in a world filled with giant franchises, that felt refreshing. 3.5 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. One of the nicest surprises I found this month. Rewatching Top Gun: Maverick on the big screen again this month reminded me just how ridiculously entertaining this movie is. The flying sequences remain absolutely stunning. The first time I saw it, I was blown away by the technical achievement. This time, I found myself appreciating the emotional side more. Because underneath all the jet fighters, afterburners, and Tom Cruise running at full speed, this is really a movie about aging. It's about legacy. It's about regrets. And it's about learning how to let go. Which is funny because nobody has spent more time refusing to let go than Tom Cruise. But that's what makes Maverick work. For the first time in decades, Cruise allows himself to play someone who's getting older, someone whose body hurts, someone whose generation is being replaced. And somehow, he turned that into one of the best blockbusters of the modern era. The final mission still absolutely rips. The audience gets nervous. People lean forward in their seats. And that finale remains one of the most thrilling action sequences since Luke Skywalker took that X-Wing down the Death Star trench. 4 stars out of 5. Cruise may be older, but this movie still flies circles around most modern blockbusters. From fighter pilots to psychological nightmares. Then things got deeply uncomfortable with the indie horror mindbender Obsession. This movie absolutely messed me up. Not because it was terrifying in a traditional horror sense, because it felt emotionally toxic. Like watching somebody slowly destroy themselves while insisting everything is completely fine. Which, if you've spent enough time online, feels a little too familiar. This is the first feature film from Carey Barker, whose YouTube horror shorts I already enjoyed. And what impressed me most is how confident the filmmaking feels. The movie creates this constant sense of unease. Scenes linger too long. Characters stand where they shouldn't. Conversations feel wrong. Everything feels slightly off. And that tension just keeps tightening. The lead performances are really strong too, especially Indy Navarrete, who goes from vulnerable to completely unhinged in ways that genuinely surprised me. The movie isn't perfect. Some of the ideas don't fully land, but I appreciate horror movies willing to take risks, and I appreciate seeing another YouTube creator successfully make the jump to feature filmmaking. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd, a strong debut from a filmmaker I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Time for something a little lighter. Next up was Guy Ritchie's latest globe-trotting action adventure, In the Grey. This one is basically Guy Ritchie comfort food. Not peak Guy Ritchie, not Snatch, not Lock, Stock, not even The Man from U.N.C.L.E., but perfectly watchable. Jake Gyllenhaal and Henry Cavill have great chemistry together, and that's what carries the movie. They're constantly taking shots at each other, cracking jokes, and acting like 2 old friends who occasionally have to kill people for a living. The story itself? Pretty lightweight. Think the A-Team with a little Sicario light sprinkled on top. The villain never feels particularly threatening, and the stakes never feel huge. But the locations are fun, the action is solid, and everybody involved looks like they're having a good time. Will I remember much of it 6 months from now? Probably not. Did I enjoy the ride? Absolutely. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. A perfectly good matinee watch with popcorn and air conditioning. One of the most beautiful big-screen rewatches of the month came courtesy of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Watching this again on the big screen was like revisiting a dream. A beautiful, heartbreaking, sword-fighting dream. Ang Lee created something truly special here because this isn't just an action movie. It's a romance, a tragedy, a meditation on freedom, and occasionally a movie where people kick each other through walls while flying across rooftops. The bamboo forest fight remains one of the most beautiful action sequences ever filmed. Not action choreography, not martial arts choreography, any choreography, period. And what struck me most this time were the performances. Chow Yun-fat and Michelle Yeoh bring so much quiet heartbreak to their characters. Years of love, years of sacrifice, years of regret, all sitting just below the surface. And Zhang Ziyi remains incredible, a force of nature throughout the entire film. I'd also forgotten how good Chang Chen is here. His low character could have easily been a one-note romantic interest, but he brings a rebellious charm and vulnerability that makes the relationship work. 4 stars out of 5. A reminder that action movies can still be poetry. Speaking of masterpieces, and then I revisited what remains my favorite Star Wars movie ever made, The Empire Strikes Back. What can I say about Empire that hasn't already been said? This isn't just my favorite Star Wars movie. It's one of the movies that helped define my love of cinema. I still remember standing in line as a kid in Jacksonville, North Carolina, waiting with my parents to see this thing. I had my Joe Johnston sketchbook, my Art of the Empire Strikes Back book, and I was absolutely obsessed. Then the movie started, and my brain basically exploded. The Battle of Hoth, the asteroid chase, Dagobah, Cloud City, the AT-AT walkers, Yoda, every frame felt magical. And as I've gotten older, the movie has only gotten better. Because now I appreciate the heartbreak, the failures, the risks, the fact that the heroes lose, and that final confrontation between Luke and Vader, still one of the greatest climaxes in movie history. Han frozen in carbonite still hurts. Yoda's wisdom still resonates, and Vader's revelation remains one of the greatest story twists ever put on film. 5 stars out of 5. The Force is absolutely strongest with this one, and nearly 50 years later, filmmakers are still trying to catch up. Which brings us to Passenger. This one was frustrating, because the trailer was great. The opening 10 minutes were pretty great too. Then the movie immediately runs out of ideas. It's basically In the Mouth of Madness meets van life influencers, and somehow that combination isn't nearly as fun as it sounds. The premise starts strong with an eerie, looping highway encounter that genuinely got under my skin. Then the movie starts explaining things, and explaining more things, and introducing mythology, and introducing more mythology, until the mystery completely evaporates. By the third act, it turns into a collection of horror cliches stitched together with duct tape and jump scares, which is a shame, because there was a genuinely creepy short film hiding inside this thing somewhere. The token wise elder warning people about the curse, the scratch mark mythology, the spooky visions, the terrible ending. It just keeps stacking horror tropes on top of each other until the suspense completely disappears. 2 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. The trailer was scarier than the movie. But the month wasn't over yet. The Star Wars marathon continued with The Mandalorian and Grogu. I can already hear parts of the Star Wars fandom sharpening their lightsabers, because this movie is going to be divisive. Hardcore fans are going to argue whether it belongs on Disney Plus or in theaters, whether it's cinematic enough, whether it moves the mythology forward, all that stuff. But watching this with younger audience members reminded me that Star Wars doesn't always have to be The Empire Strikes Back. Sometimes it can just be fun. And that's largely what this is. Pedro Pascal remains great as Mando, stoic, capable, space dad extraordinaire, and Grogu continues to be the galaxy's most effective merchandising strategy. Rada the Hutt showing up looking like he just finished a 6-month CrossFit program wasn't on my bingo card either. The movie absolutely feels like 3 Disney Plus episodes stitched together into one feature. But I still had a decent time, and the kids in my theater absolutely loved it. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. Not every Star Wars adventure needs to carry the weight of the galaxy. Then things got weird. Then it was time for some body horror with a side of Ozempic anxiety in Saccharin. This one felt like somebody took the substance, mixed it with Ozempic discourse, and sprinkled in a little Cronenberg body horror, and occasionally stirred the pot with human ashes. Not exactly family entertainment. What worked for me was the central idea. The movie taps into something very real. Our obsession with self-image, weight loss, perfection, the constant pressure to optimize ourselves. And it turns those anxieties into something physical and disgusting, which is exactly what body horror is supposed to do. Midori Francis is really good here. The movie doesn't always work. The pacing gets uneven. Some of the ideas feel underdeveloped, but I appreciated the attempt. And some of the imagery genuinely made me uncomfortable, which means it probably succeeded. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. Maybe don't watch this while eating dinner. Speaking of uncomfortable, one of the weirdest theatrical experiences of the month came from the liminal nightmare known as Backrooms. This may have been the strangest theater experience I had all month, because I completely understand why some people are going to hate this movie, and I completely understand why other people are going to become obsessed with it. This isn't traditional horror. This is atmosphere. This is anxiety. This is dread. This is wandering through an endless nightmare office designed by David Lynch after getting trapped inside an abandoned office depot. The opening hooked me immediately, and the production design is fantastic. The yellow wallpaper, the fluorescent lights, the empty hallways. Everything feels wrong, like reality itself is having a nervous breakdown. And for a first feature from Kane Parsons, it's kind of amazing what he pulled off. The guy is only 20 years old and already creating imagery that sticks in your brain. I did think the final act explained a little more than I wanted. Personally, I would have stayed more mysterious, but I'm still impressed by the ambition. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd, and I wouldn't be surprised if this eventually becomes a cult phenomenon. And now, the train wreck watch of the month. Oh, sweet, merciful cinema gods. Pitfall. Where do I even begin? This thing starts with a reasonably promising premise. A little survival horror, a little wilderness danger, some decent setup. Then it completely falls apart, and keeps falling apart, and then falls apart again. Every new plot development somehow becomes dumber than the previous one. The screenplay feels like it was written by a committee trapped in separate rooms that weren't allowed to communicate. And the visual effects? Woof. CGI blood, CGI rain, CGI embers. Everything looked fake. At one point, I genuinely expected the mountain to reveal itself as a PlayStation 2 cutscene. And the final 15 minutes? Absolute chaos. Not the good kind. The how did this make it into the final cut kind. 3 or 4 storylines are all trying to become important at the exact same time, and somehow none of them work. I felt bad for the cast. I felt bad for the crew. I felt bad for myself. 1 star out of 5 on Letterboxd. The real pitfall wasn't in the woods. It was buying the ticket. Thankfully, things improved considerably with John Carney's music drama, Power Ballad. This one was a pleasant surprise. Not top-tier John Carney, not Once, not Sing Street, not Begin Again, but still pretty charming. Paul Rudd and Nick Jonas make for an unexpectedly likable pairing. And what I appreciated most is that the movie understands creativity. The late-night conversations, the chasing of inspiration, the weird magic of collaboration. The central conflict about ownership of a song actually gives the movie more weight than I expected. Who deserves credit? Who owns an idea? And how much of being a good artist overlaps with simply being a decent person? Good questions. The movie doesn't dig quite as deep as Carney's best work, but it still leaves you with a smile. And in a year where plenty of movies are trying to be dark, cynical, or edgy, that counts for something. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. A solid date night movie with a good heart. And finally, I wrapped up May with an unusual World War II story in Pressure. A World War II movie about meteorologists. I know, stay with me. Because this is actually a pretty interesting story. Most D-Day movies focus on soldiers storming beaches. This movie focuses on the people trying to decide whether those soldiers should even be landing. Andrew Scott is excellent as James Stagg. Brendan Fraser brings real weight to Eisenhower. And Chris Messina gets some contrarian moments as the American meteorologist constantly challenging assumptions. The movie occasionally feels like a stage play or prestige History Channel production. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. The suspense comes from conversations, forecasts, decisions, and the knowledge that millions of lives hang in the balance. It's not flashy. It's not revolutionary. But it tells an important story that most people probably don't know. 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. Turns out weather forecasting can be surprisingly intense.
Looking back at May, this was one of those months that reminded me why I love going to the movies. Not because every film was great, far from it. I had a 1-star disaster, a few frustrating disappointments, a handful of pleasant surprises, and a whole lot of solid 3-star nights at the theater. But I also got to revisit 2 absolute masterpieces with A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. Movies that still inspire me decades later. Movies that helped shape my imagination. Movies that remind me why I fell in love with cinema in the first place. And maybe that's the real value of keeping a movie diary. Not every movie needs to be life-changing. Not every movie will be a 5-star masterpiece. Sometimes it's enough to discover something new, revisit something old, or occasionally sit through something so bad it becomes its own form of entertainment. Drop your favorite May movie you watched recently in the comments. And until next time, see you at the movies.